And David is a co-founder, a managing partner of Avery Law, and he's a winner of Best Fundraising Lawyer in 2021. And I think today we're going to cover yet the most serious topic that we've covered so far: how to make it legal, how to make sure you're protected. And yeah, David, can you please tell us about yourself, maybe a little bit of your background as well?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you very much for the introduction, Anna. It's obviously a pleasure to be here, first and foremost, and thanks for asking me to come and join you to sort of have this chat. Just before I introduce myself, I just picked up on something you said about the most serious webinar you've had to date. And I often find that people think lawyers are these, sort of scary, serious people. But and actually, when you are a startup, early stage company, lawyers can sort of be seen as expensive and very serious. But I suppose when I introduce myself and explain the way we work, that will all become clear as to this does not have to be so serious, but it is important. So no, thanks for the introduction. I suppose, as Anna said, I'm one of the co-founders of Avery Law, which is a boutique regulated law firm here in the UK, specifically providing English law advice to what I would describe as growth tech startups and scale-ups. So where we have come from sort of traditional larger law firms, we've really brought down our experience of working on quite large sort of corporate fundraisings, merger and acquisition transactions, both actually in the UK and cross-border in many jurisdictions. We decided to bring that niche right down to the early stage entrepreneur and help them essentially all the way through that, what we call corporate life cycle. So helping really from idea stage all the way to exit.
Great. And I mean, why is such a turn of events? Why did you turn from being a corporate lawyer to working with startups? I mean, startups are great, but this is a very, I think, uncertain area, and you never know if a startup is going to survive, and 99% of them don't. So how did you choose it? Why this path?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, for me, having worked with large corporates and larger organizations, yes, you get to work with individuals, but the individuals are part of a very sort of large, I mean, we can call them jigsaws or cogs. They're all part of something much larger than them. And it was quite intense, long hours, long nights, not really gaining too many relationships along the way. There wasn't that sort of human interaction on the transactions. It was very corporate, to say the least. So, and I always wanted to do something more human, more relationship driven. So for me, working with startups, and I suppose I've always had a passion for technology myself. Ever since I was at university, I wrote my thesis actually on, this is going back some, it was all about intellectual property infringement and the world of Napster. I don't know how many people who are listening remember Napster and the early stages of sort of downloading music for free. But I was always interested in technology from a very young age. So I suppose really bringing my experience to the technology sort of industry, was something I really wanted to do. And I suppose why and how, why did we fall into the startups? I suppose you've got that aspect, but actually creating a law firm from nothing and sort of getting big, large corporate clients from day one is incredibly difficult. So when we set about the law firm, we actually did have this idea of, onboarding lots of large corporate clients, because that was our experience. But naturally, reputationally, large corporate clients like large corporate law firms. They don't like small, cool, trendy boutique law firms. So naturally, we fell into that space of working working with entrepreneurs and startups.
That's really interesting. I think that I see that you're very active in this environment. I've seen that you went to the Hustle Awards by Startup Magazine, and you've been called disruptive legal suppliers. Why disruptive? What does that mean?
Yeah, I suppose when someone's talking about you, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but what I've noticed is that someone's talking about you, it's only positive because they're either afraid of what you're doing in the market or they want to almost copy it. So it can be both in that sense. But when I talk, or when we refer to disruptive law firms, and there's actually a lot of us now, which is fantastic for the industry and clients.
What does it mean for the startups?
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose it's those law firms that challenge the traditional law firm model, those that want to do something differently. Traditionally lawyers would charge by the hour, right? For the time spent on a certain matter, with clients having no sight. How much am I spending? I have no idea. So a lot of our work can either be fixed fees or capped fee model basis. But actually the most disruptive thing, I think, is actually our own use of technology. So we actually use a lot of technology to help automate, our drafting or transaction management, which naturally just keeps our costs down for clients. So I think disruption is all about, it's about lean, being a lean law firm, but also it's about being able to pivot quickly, pivot like a little bit like a startup, able to pivot when something's going badly. Right. As long as we remain sort of a small boutique, we're easily able to adapt to the market, to the client, to pivot quite quickly. So all of those things, I think, sort of add up to become, what we think is a disruptive law firm.
All right. Well, I think it's a great point about pivoting, because a lot of startups end up in this dead zone where they love their startup so much they don't want to pivot, and it's not going anywhere. So what were your challenges as a founder? Were there any, or do you have this miracle case where everything just magically works?
Well, yeah, I suppose being a founder of a law firm is but I mean it's similar to the extent, although I suppose law firms, well, traditionally we didn't take on equity fundraising, but actually now there are law firms in the market who take on investment and are more like traditional tech companies. But yeah, I mean, every day is a challenge, right? I mean, there's no day that goes by where you don't have something that is challenging. But I think for me as a founder, you're creating something on a daily basis, and that's what sort of gets you going.
Okay, awesome. All right. I just wanted to quickly turn to our audience and say that if you have any questions for me or for David, of course, probably not for me, hopefully not for me, because this is a very great area for me, and I'm hoping to learn here as much as anyone else. But just don't hesitate and ask anything, and I'll make sure that we have it here on air. But let's just let's go a bit further and actually talk about other startups. So when is the right time for a startup to come to you? When should I do it? For example, I have a friend, and we have an idea. Do I go to the lawyer when we have a name for it, or when we have a landing page, or when we have a first customer? So what's your experience here?
Yeah, so I commonly refer to that as the idea stage. So, and actually I would actively encourage at that stage for founders to do their research in terms of finding a lawyer they might want to work with. And I suppose I say that because what we do, and obviously what some of our peers do in the industry, and I can recommend some other lawyers, I always like to speak highly of other people, is provide not just legal advice, but actually putting people in the right direction to where they need to get to. So, and we can talk about that holistic service, that people provide, but it's so much more than just being a lawyer. And yes, I can tell you, I can run clearance searches on your name, and I can tell you whether it might infringe someone else. I can tell you how to protect it. We can go down that route. Yes, and that costs money. But actually, I think one of the most vital things on an early stage perspective is actually, just finding someone that can provide some guidance. So because we talk to many founders, I've actually seen scenarios where I've had a founder come to me, or a founder's gone somewhere else, and it's quite clear that they need a CTO. They have great financial experience or great commercial experience, but actually, it's quite clear that they're lacking someone with sort of technical experience. And actually, we've sort of hooked people up and partnered people together to build something quite beautiful, basically just on a relationship thing. We said, I know this person, why don't you reach out? They're looking for some form of technical role for some equity in a business. Why don't you reach out? But I think it's always important to just get to know the market, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's a lot of us, not just lawyers, whether it's growth tech accountants or scale advisors, coaching. There's a lot of mentoring in the early stage. There's a lot of people who are willing to collaborate to support people in their idea stage. So you just don't know how far you can get. And I'm sort of talking myself. Oh, there we go. There's my dog that I said wouldn't bark during this.
Yeah, we were notified before that.
So definitely get in touch with someone as soon as possible, because you never know what they can bring to the table.
Right. Okay. You're absolutely right, I think. And but there are so many cases when you work on a startup with your friend or with a family member, and you think, oh my God, nothing can go wrong. We're just best friends, and in this case, so we never went to a lawyer at the idea stage, and now we have 1,000 customers, and things are starting to get more serious. So did we miss the point of going to a lawyer, or it's better late than never?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely better late than never. And actually, it's probably never too late. Well, unless the company fails, but then you've got different problems. But and I think, one thing actually, which is probably quite important just from a legal perspective and keeping fees down, is that actually what I find is, as lawyers, we make more money if someone hasn't come to us earlier, because we end up actually having to rectify or fix things that could have been avoided, later down the line. So actually, I do encourage people to come, because you can get much better deals out of us as lawyers. We'll support you. We can build things, for you on more cost-effective models. Whereas if you come to us and you say, "Oh, I need your help. We've got this thing. We need to do it tomorrow, and we've done all this stuff," and you're like, "Well, there's a bit of a problem here. We need to rewind and do it quite quickly." Then it can obviously cost a lot of money.
Oh, that makes sense. But, you're a fundraising lawyer, and, the best one out there. So first of all, tell us what it means, and, let's dive into this. So how do I find the best investor for me? And what is the best investor? Are they actually there? Do they exist? How do I find one?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, because I get asked a lot by founders, who've got fantastic ideas, pitch decks prepared, looking fantastic. And they're like, "Do you know anyone? Or where do you think I can go?" And yes, we know a lot of, venture capital funds. We know a lot of angel syndicates, for example, high net worth individuals. but it's really hard. It's really hard to link founders to investors. And likewise, actually, interestingly, I'm talking to a few people in the market. I can't disclose too much, but we're building something quite interesting in this space. So do watch this space. But there is some really unique relationship-driven ways of linking founders to investors. And interestingly, we get asked on the investor side, because it's also investors, they have funds ready to deploy, or actually sometimes what we find is the investor has a fantastic idea themselves, but they're just looking for the right founders to go away and build it. So actually it's sometimes a two-way street. But I mean, one I suppose name drop right now for anyone who is looking for an investor.
Let's do it.
There's a fantastic platform that's quite new in the market called landscape.vc. I would recommend looking for it. It is more focused for venture capital funds, but if you're looking to approach funds, it's a fantastic site which provides, I suppose, anonymous reviews of venture capital funds from the founder side. So it's really useful to sort of whittle out the ones that you want to avoid. So
absolutely,
that's a resource for founders.
Oh, I think lots of founders would find it just golden, because I mean, especially as a first-time founder, you never know where to go, and there are so many of those. And yeah, I guess finding the right one is very tricky. But what do you think about like the changing market? The rumors that investors are not really investing right now and stuff like that. To be honest, in my personal experience, I haven't noticed that, honestly. But what I noticed is that everyone is talking about giving more freedom, or having more freedom for the founders to choose their investors. And do you think that's true? And is there really freedom of choice for the founder if you're approached by the investor and you don't really see a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I haven't seen is money drying up. So, there's lots of investors who are sitting on capital ready to deploy. And that's obviously partly why inflation is going through the roof at the moment, especially in the UK. There's just so much money sitting in bank accounts ready to be thrown into any form of investment. And I think especially in the UK, not traditionally maybe across wider Europe, for example, but in the UK, you have a lot of really good tax efficient investor relief schemes. So investors are obviously willing, if they're able to, put money into startups. So fantastic. In terms of, I suppose, founders having multiple options or routes, I think there is, because as I say, there's a lot of access to capital. But I think unfortunately, because of that access to capital, founders, they might not, I suppose, because investors, it's quite a small, that's what I'm trying to say, it's quite a small network in that sense. So there's a lot of sort of hammering, I suppose, across the market with things like valuations. So founders won't necessarily get a good deal right now, even though there's a lot of capital, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, investors obviously know the market, and they know that they can obviously push valuations down as much as possible to get as good deal as they can.
Okay, so what is the best first step that a founder can do to find their right investor, to find their best investor? And what is your experience in working with different types of investors? What is probably the easiest one for the founders to approach? Is it an angel investor? Is it a VC?
Yeah, good question. Tough question. I suppose I should just quickly say some founders might get, so, platforms like LinkedIn, where people perhaps talk about that they might be fundraising, or if they have in their name in brackets, looking to raise funds, you might be approached by people who will promise things like, I'll find you, X amount of investment, but you need to pay, for example, £5,000 per month, and then you need to give me 5% in equity on your fundraise. So those are traditionally called introducers. Be careful, I suppose, is my message.
Oh my God, I've been doing it for free.
Yeah, so I suppose be careful, because you get these introducers who are unregulated, and then you get corporate finance houses who are regulated, who can obviously do the same thing for the same fee, but will obviously find you reputable investors. So I suppose I thought I'd just mention that as something for founders to be careful about, because if someone's desperate for fundraising, you can often get caught on this trap with an unregulated introducer, and then you can be on the hook to be paying them lots of money on a monthly basis when they actually don't really do anything, or they say they will and they won't, and you have no protection, unfortunately. So just be careful. But then I suppose, finding investors, I think the one thing, if I were to create a startup tomorrow, where would I go? That's, I suppose, how I think about answering that question. So angels are good to approach if, I suppose, you have access to friends and family who are of, I suppose, high net worth is a strange term nowadays, because high net worth for investment purposes is quite a low threshold. So it's not like, your traditional multimillionaire. It's more like who's got a bit of spare cash, who doesn't want to put it into a savings account and get no interest. That could be an angel investor, right? You get a better return, fingers crossed.
Right.
So I think, if you have a large network of people, then an angel sort of base is a really good place to start. Otherwise, you've got so-called angel syndicates. Angel syndicates are normally financially regulated in their jurisdiction to sort of build a group of angels so that you're only liaising with one person. So it's like a syndicate of angels. Right. But because they're regulated, the sort of manager of that syndicate has some form of, they have to look after the syndicate. So sometimes the terms of the fundraise won't be as good as you could have if you'd gone to 10, 20 angels. And I think obviously venture capital funds, if you can't find angels, very early stage, there are some early accelerator venture capital funds, what we call, and especially in the UK, what we call SEIS funds, who would invest. And obviously they're quite easy to approach, and you need to look at them and search whether, I suppose, they would invest in your startup's industry, whether it's health tech, agri-tech, because you might have like a climate focus or a food focus, whatever it is, finding the right fit. But obviously with a fund like that, you'll be giving more rights away as a founder. So I think you just need to weigh up the pros and cons of where you go in the first instance.
What about government support? I think, previous talk, with Patrick from Codepics, he mentioned it, and he said that he would definitely recommend it, because I'm not sure if he's used it, but he said it was a wonderful opportunity, especially in the UK. So is it, and do you believe that it's a working kind of thing?
Yeah, so in the UK we call it grant funding, and I know it's quite big, across the tech industry, across Europe, for example. Like in Estonia, they have fantastic grants for tech companies.
Awesome.
The reason why it's not as popular in the UK, however, is because of the investor relief schemes. So if you do get grant funding from the UK government, it reduces the amount that you can take on in investor relief investment cash. So let's say you take on, I suppose, I won't go into detail on this, but we have this relief, and the threshold you can raise under it is £150,000. If you went and got grant funding of 50,000 or 100,000, you could then only bring on angels wanting SEIS for the difference. So let's say 50,000.
Oh, okay.
So the reason why it's not popular here in the UK is because companies would rather raise money from angel investors, because you can encourage people to get cash much simpler than you can from a government, because you would have to show why your company is so unique and, you know, get the grant funding.
Oh, I see. But what you said about the difference and only being able to raise the difference, then does it work like as long as your startup is alive, basically, or does it work for just another financial year or something like this?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to these investor relief schemes in the UK, it's for the lifetime of the company. So
oh wow,
for any government grants or fundings you get, it reduces the amount you can obtain from investors seeking this relief. Obviously, you can raise funds which are not tax efficient. It doesn't stop you from doing it.
Right.
So that, I suppose that's why it's not as popular here in the UK.
So would maybe micro-size companies be looking into that? You know, someone that doesn't really want to become a unicorn eventually.
Yeah, or if the company itself wasn't eligible for any of these tax efficient investor schemes, because some aren't. There are qualifying conditions, and I suppose we don't have enough time to go into all the conditions of them. But if your company wasn't eligible, or let's say it was a UK company, but most of the business was, you know, arising out of, I don't know, Berlin, for example, and in the tech scene there, then it wouldn't be eligible. But actually, then state or government funding might be a better route for you.
Okay. Okay, that's understandable. Okay, so what are the common mistakes that the founders make when they approach their investor, or when they start working with the investor?
Okay, this is a good question. The first mistake is signing a term sheet as soon as they receive it. So I've seen lots of founders, and I appreciate people can get sort of quite excited about receiving a term sheet from someone to invest, but then they immediately sign it before having spoken to a lawyer or you know, run past someone what might be what I call market standard. So actually, when that happens, it's often very difficult to sort of unwind that. So you can, it's very difficult, although term sheets aren't legally binding, it's incredibly difficult when you go forward to negotiation of these documents to say something else, and you know, more often than not, the lawyers acting for the investor will say, well, no, because that's not what the term sheet says, right? So it's often really difficult to go backwards. So I think one of the biggest things is when someone receives a term sheet, I often say to people, please just send it to me. Honestly, it will take me 5 minutes. I will tell you whether it's market standard. Or if there's anything that's sort of glaringly, obviously strange. And, you know, you can go and discuss it with that investor. So I think that's one of the biggest points. I think secondly, I don't know how many points you want on this.
Let's do, I don't know, 3, 4.
We talk all day. I think secondly is not being prepared in terms of your own company. So, you know, it can be as simple as not having, let's say you have co-founders,
right?
You know, but you haven't properly documented the arrangement, or actually you haven't even issued the shares, you know, and you don't know how to do it, or you know, you haven't spoken to someone about it, or you don't really have sort of agreements in writing with suppliers. I don't know, or customers, whatever whatever is essential for you as a business. But I suppose coming to an investor without these things, you know, it can be negative, and sometimes worst case can actually kill a deal, depending on how risk, I suppose, averse that investor is, you know, once they ask questions. Right. So I suppose on that point, I suppose it's more about being prepared. I think that goes back to the question you were asking earlier about when should someone come to a lawyer, you know, as soon as possible, right? Because it's these things that we can say to you, you know, have you done X, Y, Z? Let's do a quick health check. Let's get you prepped. Right. you know, and we often do these exercises. We call them health checks, you know, pre-fundraise health checks, where we almost send you an investor due diligence questionnaire as if we were the investor, and you go, oh gosh, and then you go away and you go, what haven't we done? And we work out what's important. So yeah,
I've done. Yeah, sorry, I've just. It is coming back to me because I've done a few pitches myself, and you know, when the investors start asking questions, and of course, ultimately you cannot be prepared for all of them, but apparently I wasn't prepared for any of them, so it was really eye-opening. And you know, when they ask you like how you're going to make money, or like how, but the other one is actually very obvious, but a lot of times you're just stuck there. And yeah, so this is, I think, a great exercise, and you should definitely do it. And I cannot emphasize it more. I mean, there are so many places where you can practice your pitch, so as many times as you can. So yeah, that's a very good one, David. Thank you for reminding us. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
To be honest, I mean, I suppose that was probably more than one, because I suppose it's just being prepared generally. But I think I probably like, I mean, I suppose I'll just say this as a final point. I mean, there's lots of points, obviously, but I think remember that the investors are sophisticated. So, you know, I've seen a lot over the years, quite a few founders thinking they're almost, you know, slightly bigger than they are, maybe more intelligent than they probably are. But, you know, I think that can actually be a quite negative thing. I think remaining humble and remembering these investors are incredibly sophisticated. So when they ask questions, they're asking a question for a particular reason, not just for the sake of it. So I think that's a really important thing. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think this is very unusual, but yeah, a lot of times I think startup founders approach, especially angel investors, just like money bags, basically. And yeah, so, you know, you've got money, why not, you know, invest in me? And that's usually a very big mistake. But yeah, that's a good one. I like it. Actually, one final point, which is actually really important. It's probably more focused for UK fundraising, but I would imagine other European jurisdictions probably have similar financial services laws. But when you communicate to potential investors about a fundraise, you know, or an issue of shares in the company, you've got to be quite careful, because our laws don't actually allow us to do that unless they are two high net worth individuals or sophisticated investors. So there's generally some language which is a little bit like a disclaimer, which accompanies any communication to potential investors. So I often tell people that, and I often give them the language for free, because I don't want to see people get burnt. So that's quite important. Right. So I think, just as a general point, always check. If you're a UK company, German company, whatever company you are, check if there's any such laws. That's great. I mean, no, my doorbell. Okay. That could be sure. Quite, I mean, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Yeah. Okay. So far, I think we've got some amazing advice from David. And if anyone wants to ask a question, then there he goes. Sorry. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, and yeah, I wanted to ask you. Okay, another question about the investors. So basically, I think those cases are not so often, but that happens sometimes when you get approached. Say, I don't know, you want to create
a marketplace, I don't know, and you get approached by an investor who actually usually invests in something totally different, I don't know, in healthcare or whatever. So basically they don't have any expertise in the startup that you're working on. Is it a complete waste of time of talking to them, or should you give it a try? And investment is still an investment. You need money, and just grab it and run with it.
Yeah, I think if they're angels, my advice is always to raise as much money as possible from as fewer people as possible. So, angels will traditionally invest in many industries, right? Whether it's health tech, agri-tech, edu-tech, it doesn't matter, because they're just looking for the next unicorn to make some money back on. If, however, if this was more institutional investor, venture capital, company, I think it 100% helps that they have experience within your sector and industry, because they will most likely want rights, like consent rights over material matters that happen in the business. And also probably they'll want a seat on the board of directors. And there would be nothing worse than having someone on your board who has no knowledge about what you do as a business. And I've actually seen investor founder breakdowns post investment. And then you have all types of sort of inside coups, whether it's the founders trying to get rid of the investor or the investors trying to get rid of the founders. And it can just sort of be a complete waste of time. And sadly, obviously, you're more likely to fail.
Oh, that's a very interesting point. I mean, I've never heard of these breakups between a founder and an investor. So what do you do if, say, you understand that it doesn't work? If it's an angel investor, but it's a person that wants to be 100% involved in the startup, and at the same time has zero or I don't know, very little experience in what you're doing. How do you do that?
Yeah, I would be a bit wary. So if it was an angel investor and and it depends on the size of the investment, obviously, if they're willing to put in a large amount of money, out of the total round that you're looking to raise, then of course you need to entertain allowing them onto the board or giving them enhanced rights, but what you shouldn't do is give them too much or lose your autonomy, lose your control as a founder team, whatever you are, just to make sure, because there could, I suppose you don't want to fail at the first hurdle, because you are more likely than not going to require further funding. So often you don't want to be trapped with people on your boards or who have these rights who wouldn't actually give them up for larger investors coming on later. So I would just be a bit careful about people like that. People maybe who ask too many questions. And actually that's also leads me to quite an interesting point about potential investors. So if you have a potential investor and they're asking too many questions, be concerned in the fact that maybe they have an ulterior motive. Why are they asking so many questions? Are they just trying to find out so much about your company to maybe, worst case, steal your idea and go and replicate it? But just be a bit wary of giving too much information away to, I suppose, angels, people who don't have a reputation. If they're a large VC and they've got a good reputation, then you shouldn't worry, obviously.
How many questions are too many?
I think, we call it the smell test.
Okay.
If something seems a bit strange to you, you should probably speak to a lawyer and go, is this odd? Or if they're asking for access to the GitHub repository, for example, that's a bit strange. And
we're coming back to the initial question, when should you get a lawyer?
As soon as possible.
At this point, you should probably have a lawyer already.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, if you're speaking to investors, it's almost too late, but it's never too late, as we said earlier.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, so what was the worst advice for the startups or for the founders or for the founder investor relationships that you've ever heard given to a startup? Sorry.
Yeah, that's putting me on the spot. Worst advice. I don't know if I can't think of, I can't think of worst advice in that sense.
Okay. So, don't get a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's family.
If someone advised you not to get
lawyer.
a lawyer, yeah, I would be concerned.
Right. What's your best advice? To all the early stage, idea stage, or MVP stage founders.
Yeah, I think. I mean, this is not even just legal, although it will help with attracting investment. It's more commercial points. It's more like, find product fit, do your market research, do it, overdo it, right? Find out what you might be disrupting and why there is a need for it in the market. You can never do enough of that. You don't need to worry about how you're going to commercialize the product. It's really not relevant right now. You just need to have a good idea and understand why it's going to work, as opposed to how you're going to make money from it later. You've got these revenue streams, which, well, I suppose not revenue streams, but these streams which investors will look at. One is audience. Another is obviously immediate revenue, and then the third one is actually more like affiliations or influence. What is the influence of the product, and how could you commercialize it with potential partners, for example? So a lot of founders will try and do all three. They'll try and funnel all of their ideas into all three, but investors aren't that fast. If you can nail down one of those three funnels, you've got a fit. You could have no product, but you could have 3 million users behind your idea and product. Well, that's exciting for an investor.
Definitely.
Or you could obviously have revenue day one, which is naturally exciting for an investor because it's already almost profitable. But then you can go and use the money that's invested to build out the marketing and make it even more profitable. Fantastic. Or obviously you might have a network of partners that will support your product that you commercialize through, like affiliations. Could be like you've got a health tech product, and you partner with hospitals or private clinics, for example. If you know all of them, but you haven't yet done this, well, then you're already in a good shape to, pitch that idea. So I think, I think that's something I often sort of think about or talk about with founders. Don't worry about all three streams, just find one and focus on that in your pitch deck.
Oh, that's perfect. And I think your point about not commercializing it too early on, I think that's very important, because usually what we see in our experience is that all the founders want to commercialize it first. Like, how do I make money? This and this and this, and it's almost never about the customer and what they need, but always about the money. So I guess it's a fantastic point. But when it comes to commercializing, and we've got this, we should get it covered. When you are thinking about commercializing, what do you do in terms of the legal side?
Yeah. Well, I suppose it depends what your business is. First and foremost, like I suppose, just using the example of a tech product, a lot of tech products, have a SaaS element, a subscription as a service element to them, whether they're a platform, that you obviously need to prepare, simple terms and conditions for your SaaS product. So when it comes to commercializing, and actually this can be said for any type of commercial contract, the one which brings, we can say, which brings the bacon home, you know, the one that brings the money in is actually one of your most fundamental contracts. And I've seen people come to me, ask me for fee proposals, and we've sent them what I think is a really reasonable fee proposal, and they've said, "Oh no, that's way too high. Oh, you know, it's just our terms and conditions. Oh, we only need like 2 or 3 pages," and we keep saying, "Do you realize this is your most fundamental contract? It's how you make money." So I think that's really important. You know, don't really get your commercial, you know, legals correct and accurate. You know, and find good lawyers that, you know, aren't going to charge you an absolute fortune, but, you know what they're doing and are telling you what they're doing is reasonable. So that's really important, just on the general commercialization piece. So yeah, so if it's a SaaS product, you've obviously got terms and conditions. I mean, obviously, if, you know, I'm trying to think about, you know, what I just said, you might, there's really interesting things now in the market, like you have social tokens, for example, where, and I won't go into sort of Web3 and DAOs, you know, decentralized autonomous organizations, but you've got these.
But this is super interesting.
Yeah, you've got these, you've got a lot of startups now who want to create some form of social element to what they're doing for their community, for their users. So, you know, part of your commercialization piece might be the creation of social tokens, for example, which accompany, you know, whatever you're doing with them. You know, whether it's getting, you know, if you think of like an Instagram product, you know, you're getting users on board, and then they get tokens based on their contribution to the platform and helping it grow, for example. So that's quite a big thing we're seeing in the market recently, sort of last 6 months to a year, that's really boomed. Yeah, and then obviously your traditional sort of sales of goods, but, you know, it really depends what you do. But yeah, I think it's really important to speak to lawyers, and don't think of lawyers, I suppose, as just drafting contracts. You know, actually speak to them earlier. Say, I got this great idea, thinking of commercializing it, not really sure how. Actually, lawyers, because they've seen a lot of these types of arrangements and they're seeing new things develop in the market, they can actually be a very good soundboard for ideas on how to commercialize products. Oh, so don't just see us as providing legal advice.
Oh wow, yeah, that's honestly, I've never even thought of that. But I think that's great. And coming back to, you know, to Web3 and all that new stuff, how is law responding to that? I mean, this is this huge machine, you know. Is it changing?
It's an easy answer. Slowly.
Yeah. That was
yeah.
That was my guess.
It is slow. But actually, I suppose I don't know about the rest of the Europe, but UK is quite perceptive, and it talks about. I mean, if you think about sort of like the crypto space and things like that, I mean, I know it's not specific to Web3, but if you think about the crypto space, obviously the UK is trying to. Well, it says it's trying to lead the way, and it's sort of, I suppose, non-regulation of it and its acceptance of it, but you know, it's still going to take time. You know, laws don't just change overnight, unfortunately. So yeah, if you've got I suppose my advice for a founder who, if you are, you know, have an idea that's within the Web3 space or is harnessing new technologies, smart contracts, blockchain, whatever it might be, then yeah, speak to a lawyer. And actually,
even earlier.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we can introduce you to, you know, whether it's a blockchain expert or a Web3 expert, you know, someone who's a consultant, you know, who knows this stuff inside out, who can actually help you and guide you.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could probably not emphasize it more. Speak to a lawyer, and you know, it's really important. And in my personal experience, I've also felt it, because I was not smart enough to legally bind any of my relationships within the startup in a I don't know, the last decade. But yeah, it's I think there is a lot to learn, and it's absolutely great. So if you have maybe, I don't know, one last golden piece of advice that you would absolutely love to give to the founders out there, then please do.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Sorry, I caught you there again.
I don't know if it's golden, but I think if you, well, put it this way, if you're a sole founder, I would highly recommend you find a co-founder. I've seen more co-founder businesses be successful than sole founder businesses. And then moving on from that, if you do find a co-founder, make sure that you speak to a lawyer before you go and give them shares, because once you've given them shares, it's often very difficult to claw them back, and you could have a fight tomorrow. So it's really important that you build in the relevant protection mechanisms before you find co-founders.
Oh, that's, yeah, I think that is, you know, that is golden. That's absolutely perfect. But okay, we've got a few comments here. How many founders can afford to pay a lawyer to soundboard? Yeah, it would be great given your experience.
Yeah, so I mean, what we do at Avery Law is often provide free consultations where I see it as an investment into you as a potential client. Because for me, you know, it's not about just charging for advice, because that's not advice, that's more guidance. You know, it's more, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? You know, I often give people 15 minutes, you know, sometimes even half an hour, depends how excited I am about the product. You know, that soundboard, because I want to invest my time into them, because I feel like they will come back to me and use us when the time is right. You know, obviously a lot of lawyers won't do that because time is money for them. But as I say, this is a disruptive law firm. There's many of us out there who will do that.
Oh, that's amazing. So there you go. Just find a cool disruptive lawyer, and there you go. You may get something for free even. Okay, well, I don't think sadly this is the same question, but yeah, I think so far it's been absolutely great. I mean, I've learned a lot here, and hopefully our audience as well. Hopefully they're just you know, busy writing it all down. That's why there are so few questions. But David, it's been wonderful talking to you, and you know, I just hope that we do it again sometime when yeah, when we have a bigger setup, and maybe you know, something for a huge podcast. But thank you for agreeing to talk with me. It's been great.
My pleasure.
And
no, thank you for having me. I suppose if anyone is still listening, if you know, as I said, I'm more than happy to speak to people. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. You know, if you search the cap lawyer, that's me. I wear a cap, not because I'm hiding all my grey hair, which is true, but also because I spend every single day inside share capital tables, which are called cap tables. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to sort of guide people.
That's perfect. Well, thank you for the offer, David. And yeah, hopefully someone will quite soon. So thank you for talking to me. Thank you for being here. And yeah, I'll just stay in touch.
Thanks a lot, everyone.